Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for joining little late. Yes. Give me 30 seconds, Geshe, to settle. I will be back in 30 seconds. Yes, Geshe. We are good to start, right?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is the 13th session of Nagarjuna's letter to a friend. Thank you for joining, everyone. Let us start with the prayers. I will be reading from my mobile, Geshe. I won't be able to share screen. Okay. Taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. For immeasurables, may all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. May all sentient beings not be separated from the bliss that is free of suffering. May all sentient beings live in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred towards those near and far. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May all sentient beings not be separated from the bliss that is free of suffering. May all sentient beings live in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred towards those near and far. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. May all sentient beings not be separated from the bliss that is free of suffering. May all sentient beings live in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred towards those near and far. Thank you for joining for the prayers. Over to you, Geshe, for the teachings. Thank you so much.
황해도제 그래서 따와던제 보면서 담배 신이 된다. 저제 다시 들레스. 딱해서 딩을 먼저 있다. 고발내가 갔다. 내송 숨다. 된도 숨. 된저로 고발내가 있는데 중앙마다 연마스. 되게 걸때 그나다 보내마. 애냐와다 이따가 전적을 막와도 애냐와게 내 가자 여보다 사장마 네 림바션에다 그 고문을 좀 되는 소요라 어떤 상마당 어저 교산디 고변내 거원내반다 중앙을 심어도 돼 대화 연말서 어디지 그산 시에다
Tashdele to everyone. So, in our previous session, that we discussed that irrelevant of whether being born in the higher realm or the lower realm, it is equally that every one of the sentient beings suffer. And then we also discussed about the suffering that is being experienced by the three lower births, especially elaborating on the suffering that is being experienced by those who are born in the hell realm in accordance to what Nagarjuna has stated.
대선 전화가 나가주는 나라다 공부를 계산대 니게 나 티고지 단서 하선 공부를 좀 걸때 대해서 시작하는 것도 sonso nga te tep tet lawyer ramas nga ma ngode lobjong che shim ba ka so peja ta shim ba ka so tamda peja ma mo na lung ta ta nagar shik ba na nagar shik ba la ka sa na do na la ane nga ne nyang ge te wa na lo ne ship ya na ma sa chum de de khorang ge lo ship ya na ba na ja ga lo jo do ane rudup ses ane ma yongres igres de ge ane nga item ba te ane ya nyam ba tan ya so che ba chi gres 맞으나 그걸로 좀 마베 장을 또 왔다 지나 남바게 자가나 쓰고 다 자가나라 남주 요바 간실라 다 택받침 베베 남주도 시고 냠대서 하나부터 빠데 라야가 잡는 랩데 내가서 안에 그걸로 좀좀 되다 농데 봐 내시가 아니 자가로죠 근데 저는 그때 데인서 아마르베트세다 데 아마르베트 나라를 베게 안다르베트시 나라던다 나가주나 사가스 바제 데메로 데레도 engeta 자가로죠서 데카도 인자 남지 베게 그걸로 좋게 내죠 tanda kapsa na chunan ma timdera. Dili ro meno pa jes, net tada hongmas. Ani lo shibyan ma na pegare so da. Lo peya dira ta peja na ti ti yor ta tendo ngador lamme ko je. Zogo de ta dire ma jo kasana. Kumbalo sena sures. Ani konga karache yor. Ta to kumbalo se wa de tambo da 좀 de koran ngal so long simbage ani kansa ji yo dinejires.
So in our previous discussion, Geshe said that Nikila had asked or requested a sort of a session to elaborate on who is Arya Nagarjuna and a bit about his sort of biography. So Geshe said that he recalls from what he has learned during his time of study. It is from the sutra. It is being sort of like prophesied or being foretold by the Buddha that after after a certain time, after a certain time of the establishment of the Buddhism or the religion of Buddha, Buddha himself prophesied or foretold that there will be someone called Nagarjuna who will come forth and who will advance this particular dharma further after his own death. So, Arya Nagarjuna is someone that has been foretold by Buddha to be a protector and the torchbearer of the Buddhist Dharma. And he is said to be born in this place called Amravati in the Andhra Pradesh. So it seems that that is the place where Arya Nagarjuna had taken birth. So today we're going to talk about some of his deeds and his biography.
대선 나다 shibya chuna ani kumbalo se de ani jaga 아니 폐와대 저거대 다 농마산 제베 템벤 나가 아니 특별점배 숑드베 저냠데 데 아니 냠발라 소시에세도 아니 컴퓨터로 제가 알아줘도 돼 아니 담보대 받네 제가 알아줘도 인가다 아 암달베트스 되네 전에 취소 아니 날렌달베 날렌다게 나라라 아니 컴퓨터로 베다 켜본 나왔다 컴퓨터로 켜본나 내가 없어 지단 게어 저제질라 나넨다 대충다 나넨다 얘도 그런 것들 먹이 숙좀 정도 먹이 숙좀 좀 가서 딱 잡았던 줄 알았어요 또 강아지 어떻게 공부주 루트가 똑같이 뭐 되는데 시주 째게 담바세 다들 명아지 장다 나한테 장 근데 나한테 잡았나 근데 짜던 줄 알아 나 잡았나 저도 셀라 봐줘 근데 셀네 좀네 근데 던져게 돈네 잡았던 저거 제일었어 근데 다시 나 치수는 해야 다 그냥 대가서 다다데 쳐다 담아든 바 말인데 내가 비열세요. 근데게 내다들이요.
So Arya Nagarjuna was born around 400 years after after the passing away of Buddha. And he was born in the Amravati in Andhra Pradesh. And after his studies, he went to Nalanda, where he continued his studies, and then later on acted as the abbot of the Nalanda University. So it is said that during his time, the sort of like uh, the Dharma, that is the great vehicle, the Mahayana, was at the verge of disappearing. It was at the verge of declining. And at that moment, he came and then he sort of like started sort of uh, he started taking the actions to flourish this dharma. And then it is said that during that time when Nagarjuna was at Nalanda, there was a great famine, and many people in the surrounding villages were being affected by this famine, and many were dying. And it's said that in that time he had actually composed something. It's called the Treatise of turning stone into gold, I think. So one of his treatises uh, in the science of crafts that he had actually proposed, more of like an alchemy. So it is said that by the use of this treaty, by the use of the formulation of this treaty, he would actually he would be actually able to uh, turn anything into gold. And this was something that helped in elevation of the starvation and famine at that particular time. And so it is said that because of this, uh, it is believed that he was being expelled from the Nalanda because he has broken the rule or the law of the Nalanda University.
만데서 다 지장게 다 개체제 가서나 음악으로 된 간접에 돼 음악다가 kop시 없습니다. 음악을 저 트롭스 좀이다. 대세 나 내가 가서 되게 아니 음악 저 트롭제 네 단다 지탱에서 봤다. 근데 내가 내가 돌에 뭐 좀이다. 다 대세 내가 간접에 다 고물을 때 아니 됐어. 어 특별히 음악이 신대 설정에서 신대 설정에서는 땅을 시대 간접에 농가질라 신다 땅가뭐 나가면 빼라다 단가 뭐라 여러 너무 신다셔 신다데 에 나가 이래 봐서 치수 안에 신다 또 살랑가도 봐 너 매와 차 돌아도 때 이제 자수전 내 신다 앉아 저쪽이지 어디 난신게 안에 tap아진 배쳐데 나가면 자가나 숙좀 타바 좀 되다 샤주 거서 얘네 로시 배줄 때 만냐면 또 고모들 거서 팬 되게 안에 때 싹도 있는 뭐 됐선다 된대게 안에 어 냠서 땜바 냠바 라서가 지라 항상 얘기 근데 체제 전부 시작을 아니 기부쳐 내가서 택반 멤버 때마다 열었다 이제는 다 내가서 다 고발로를 kuwa temne de chunga ta lakwa to ane keva tanda lebe yenye wasu pandora lebe yenye ge te tis tampa ta ne ko mal ge tis tas so set of the nine ta o de ane nudu de chundoles ajo te jenda res na korange komulu se de tu bares korange pinja ane pa thome ya de jes thando dos o tinde to son
So, so not only this, when we think about the achievements that Arya Nagarjuna has actually done in his lifetime, one of the most important is the uh, composing of the six great treaties on Madhyamaka, and many other texts and treaties on also on Tantrayana. And so uh, he is known as the sort of like the pioneer or the pioneer in paving the path towards popularizing or in a sense bringing forth the study of the Madhyamaka school, the philosophical school. And so usually we use the word, the one who paved the path for the cartwheel. So we have the cartwheel. So it says that the example or the metaphor comes from the uh, understanding that there is a path. There used to be a path on which a cartwheel would uh, travel, but then through time, this particular road, because of not being visited or not being utilized, it loses the track. And then now again, someone else paves a new path for someone to travel on this. So therefore, it is understood that after 400 years of passing away of Buddha, Nagarjuna is considered to be the pioneer in paving the path into the study of the Madhyamaka school. And at that time, it wasn't the thing that there weren't others, practitioners or other scholars of different schools. There were indeed, especially those who are from the philosophical school that belonged to the lesser vehicle. And it is said that at that very time, there was great protest against the establishment of this particular teaching by Arya Nagarjuna. One sort of like one of the more sort of like the example that we can provide, more common example, well-known example is the example of the scholar Vasubandhu. So Master Vasubandhu, in his initial time of learning, has said that Nagarjuna is the manifestation of the devil, and my brother, so his elder brother, Asanga, was his follower because Asanga was following the teaching of and proposing the teaching of the school of the higher vehicle. So, as a sort of like as a way of criticizing it, he used to say that.
근데 이제 단단하게 특별점의 형들은 음악보다 쌤다 반이여라. 고물르고 음악이 신대서 이제 아니 파고토메게 쌤자메 신대서 이제 어떤 이게 아니 특별점의 맞서 단단하게 아주 대양 대체수 좀 독세지. 좀 제대로 하던데.
So the context of Vasubandhu accusing his elder brother Asanga to be the follower of Nagarjuna is comes from the understanding that when we talk about philosophical schools or the tenet system in Buddhism, we divide them as the tenet or the philosophical school of the lower vehicle and then the higher vehicle. In the higher vehicle, we usually classify them in the higher vehicle are the schools which are the Chittamatra and the Madhyamika. And since Nagarjuna, Arya Nagarjuna is considered to be the pioneer uh, in for this Madhyamika school, Asanga is believed to be the pioneer or the one who paved the path for the popularizing the Chittamatra, the mind-only school.
근데 이제 안에 공부를 두게 다 쉬운 뭐 좀 이면 나는 다 쉬운 단데 대 시행도 되나 다 디스코되고 근데 저거 대체 상관은 뭐스다 김바직 때라 냠냠 시트게 이제 다 실업님부터 자바 실업 저번에 다 땡사고 다쭉 땡사고 쇼이 저기 다 뺐대 내가 컴퓨터 다 미사 유마 컴퓨터 비트데 내가 지금 안에 렉터십 받은 나 땡사고 다 뺐대 다쭉 또 메테쭉 또 항상 다 땡사고 대셔요 내가 원래 코드 내가 맞아 저거 주잖아 맞아 이제 아니 건물을 다 잡아 거라니 다 로마다 취 다들 가서 저 집밖에 아니 잡으세요 아니 바란다 취다 취대 돈에 다 로마로마 잡아 이제 된 거죠
And so, in his lifetime, Arya Nagarjuna has composed a multitude of treatises, out of which the one that we're studying at this moment, a letter to a friend, which he intentionally composed for the King Gautami Putra, is one of the more simple ones which are more applicable to lay people and are easily understood by lay people. Whereas other texts that Nagarjuna has composed out of those six great treatises, the fundamental wisdom, are treatises which require a great deal of study and discipline, in particular, studying of the Buddhist texts to have or to grasp the understanding of these texts. Whereas this particular treaty that we are studying right now, known as the to a Friend, is a text that is primarily targeted to lay people and written in a way that it's very simple and easy to understand.
다 잡아시는 나는 시대 된대 동반이 거때 좀 이제 된대도 하나 봤던데 땡서 뭐 쇼시 이 시대는 다 아마 늪저도 봐야나 다 치서다 체력 타라 체력 타 딘다네 아니 뭔감 체력 컨트롤 메커니크스 저는 또 갖다 좀 쇼차 뭐라 닝가 자가 경원적 장으로 문제 걸어 보송다 자가 경원적 눕줄라다 등산 안에 컨트롤 메커니크스 데 컨트롤 피직스 about uncertain the song and they got see to mambote 갖다 좀 보면 자가 나나 달로 된다는 거 너무 갑자기 되는 이건 고물로 좀 그런 상마 시사시스 잡아시는 나도 어디서는 다 된저 띵 사보고 다다 네 된del로 되는 봐 동반이 시도 되는 다 등산 안에 컨트롤 메커닉스 된del에 띵 사와요다 되도다 나가 못 달로 망방을 계속 송다 된del로 써봐 다배 띵 사보시오 저기다 저저요서 잡아시었다 누구나
So when it comes to King Gautamiputra and Arya Nagarjuna, they have this profound relation of a guru and a student. And so Nagarjuna, Arya Nagarjuna, in his treatise, The Fundamental Wisdom, he talks about establishment of emptiness based on the idea of dependent origination. So he establishes the sort of like the understanding of emptiness based on the understanding of dependent origination. And so these days in the Western society or the Western community, we tend to uh, we tend to understand that after the establishment of science and development of science, especially physics, and now in sort of like the contemporary science or the modern science, more so in the modern science, we see the proposition of something called quantum mechanics. And so, where they talk about the nature of things. So, once a great Indian scholar told His Holiness that these concepts, which are the concepts of quantum mechanics proposed by scientists like Heisenberg, Einstein, Heisenberg, Einstein, uh, these sort of like concept that has just been proposed in near times were something that has already been discussed and proposed by scholars such as Arya Nagarjuna many of hundreds of years ago. And not only that, the very concept of dependent origination is such that the very concept of dependent origination far exceeds the profundity of the concept discussed in the quantum mechanics. So this is something that he told His Holiness.
온다 된대로 시는 샤샤나라 양테 베제도 마토샤나 되제 다 된다 건데게 베제도
So Geshe said, I think this will be enough in terms of Nagarjuna. So let us just move to the text.
그거데 리서치라고 카샤샤르금
No, so-
디스트라 베스트 오브 커뮤니티 애트원스
Geshe, computer restart ചെയ്തേ.
리스랑에 제라 그산 싸워제라 그게 맞아
No.
상관라도 단다 이게 지금 돈을 제매고 그때 음 이나 걸라 가는
Ge-
갔다 하잖아요.
Geshe la tanda di kui da che de be.
내려
Kui da che na tanda nga zi pai find la che de.
어 레스트 방
No. Desktop kan find la che de Geshe la.
안더스탠딩
Mena di namgyu chi chesa de nga zi de search chesa de.
저도 되게 sharing thing
Then
다
download la che tina.
sharing 내 띵라 걸라 직다 하셔잖아.
La
갔다
so.
하잖아요. 좀 재미있어. 전에 싫나. 지금
No. Di shoran ka zi. Di
야도
tani
숨들이.
tsemba kan de.
야도
Ya
숨들이.
da sum.
응.
Ya da sum. Na sum.
이거 되죠. 응. 뭐 뭐.
Oh. Is there anything that we can support Gisela and Tenzin Lakpala?
Yes, just the file. So I just got the file, so I can share it on the screen. So I hope
이거
everyone
좀
can see the screen.
yes yes.
Yes,
네.
yes.
Yes, we can
응.
see it.
응, 네. 하다 네 야도 숨들이도. 그냥 어제 내 코가 되라. 내 코가 되고 있나 다 동하면 동하는 신부터 내면 되라. 다 딘데 있는 동하는 신도 시험 살아다 코가 돼. 냐와 있다 된도 하다 밀 타만 찾아 거네 봐나 동하는 신을 몇대 봐야 맞선다. 다 띵한테 그래서 시험 상 하고 살아. 하고 봤던데 시험 잠지 되게 돼서 되고 말. 가져서나 내려 더 그랬어. 또 그거 되다 좀 되도 쉬워. 코바드냐 코바드달라고 합니다. 냐바이다 된도 남다도 제가 상품 말아 제가네 너버트면 내서听了说 真的코바드라 된데 너버트면 도스 말이지 너버트면 내 된다 하다면 제가는 너버트면 내 말다 될 야가지 주네 요 말에서 어디네 도르시는데
So in previous session, we did discuss about the fact that it's irrelevant where you are born. It's just the degree of suffering that you experience, but uh, it doesn't matter in which birth or rebirth, what kind of rebirth you take in the samsara. The only differentiating factor being the degree of suffering that one may experience. So, knowing that samsara, irrespective of where you are born, you are bound to suffer, and that the very nature of samsara is of the suffering. Understanding that very fact is not enough because all the sentient beings uh, uh, equally desire to separate oneself, to liberate oneself from the suffering. And so it's important to know that nature and then further uh, do things to liberate oneself from the samsara. Nagarjuna states in the letter to a friend, he states, samsara is like this, and thus we are reborn as gods, as humans, denizens in hell, as ghosts or animals. But you should know that birds not good are part of many ills. So what Nagarjuna is trying to tell us is that it doesn't matter where we are born, irrespective of the birth, the rebirth that we take. Everywhere we go, we're just plagued by suffering and ills and diseases. There is no sort of like good rebirth in that context in the samsara.
이제 다 된다 코바드 코바네바나 노바트면 내가 손다 다데 아니 시어던데 하마 와서 다 딜레니 코발레 도고 도에라 아니 가도 배제지 거래 세대나 아니 자자 좀 시들에도 고암 걸로 루브 미션나서 대답 도제 기바 마당 장스 양세 메바 길레 배제디 대배 치료 거봐 제마지스 어디 지등색들
So understanding that irrelevant of the higher rebirth or lower rebirth, the only differentiating factor being the sort of like the degree of suffering that one experiences, it is important to liberate from it. And in the verse 104, Nagarjuna states, "Give up your efforts trying to stop all this, as if your hair or clothes had just caught fire. Just do your best to not be to be born again. No greater goal or need is there than this."
나진다 코발라 아니 타야치도 아니 배제치고라 배차잖아 다 소소를 담도 어쨌든 그 남자야 진도 내가 저 거저 어쨌다 나서 도발라 매저 쇼웨나 다 내가 심받는 바 잠시안에 거는 메시지다 아니 강바다고다 거를 주는 메시지나 된저 바세를 배제치라 다 되게 딜레 아니 캐치다 그다 거를 메시지다 거를 메시지나 된저야 봐 세 잠시안에 아니 추념내 적으로 했었다 추념내 타발라 투비라니 배제식었어. 나는 내가 저 고라 메셔나 그놈도 세지. 그저 시도 나 보면 나도. 좀 배졌다라서 틀라게다 고라 메셔나 그놈도 세지. 근데 그저때 전달을 그래도 네 가르쳐서는 고라 메셔나 자식 쓰고 맞다. 나 저거대. 고라 메셔 강반 메셔 근데 고라 메셔나 근데 꼼짝는 배졌다고 냠내체 때문에 근데 치쓰고 맞다. 되게 가서나 근데 제가 그때 고라 메셔나 나가 꼼짝해서 근데 제때도는 소봉을 메직 돌아 ane chen nyamne che yongye mara, chen nyamne che le den hora meo cha dora. Ane kangpa zhawo da kuya la me shio na, kangpa la me shio na, kuya la me shio na, kali kali. Eso so so ye tik zhuwa nyinga yaro. Teso na, da di kara se wasa na, kai chenpo, kai chun tingwa, kasi kai chenpo shio jingpa tingwa ro, mata kuya la me shio na, ya ya me ta, gom jab se go mata. Di chewa na, so 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 shio dora. Da di kata dinde kai chenpo yinpa, nyamne che de. O dinde tingwa so.
So, in this verse, it tells us that even in our mundane life, if our hair catches on fire, our clothes catches on fire, we tend to drop everything and then solely focus on trying to put out that fire. And so Nagarjuna is reminding us that, yes, see, as you see the importance of dropping everything and then seeing the significance of putting off that fire. But there is even a greater sort of like action or greater thing that you need to do. That is the very practice of dharma. The very practice of dharma that leads to the liberation from this samsara that is by nature of the suffering. So when we use this sort of like the phrase, when we say hair catching on fire, clothes catching on fire, and then we say that there is a great urgency or significance in, or saying that the practice of dharma is of a greater significance, it doesn't mean that, it does not literally mean that when your hair is on fire, when your clothes is on fire, you should still persist in practicing, because that is something that is a very foolish action. Because if your head is on fire, your entire body is going to burn. If your clothes is on fire, your entire body is going to burn. And in that case, there is no longer any possibility to practice. The only thing that we need to understand from this is the significance and the urgency of wanting to practice, but not literally to practice, even if our hair or or our clothes or our body are on fire. So therefore, here, by the use of this particular sort of example or illustration, Nagarjuna emphasizes on the significance and the urgency of the practice of dharma to liberate from the samsara.
desuna da hanze tapa 코바세라 타르고레 타바세 열라라 타바 연아 아니 타바 간데레 타바 토비에게 아니 탑람도 어딘데 가려래 세저라 원다 되게 아니 나직 나 자당 맞을 때도 시도 수른다다 3대 시럽지스 냥의 대시 두바 팀에 봤어 금방 메세 메세 세미데스 사주 메노 닌다 대톱즈스 시행 되듯이.
So now that we have understood the urgency of practicing the Dharma and to attain the liberation, naturally a question would occur that what is liberation? How do I obtain this liberation? What is the path that leads to the liberation? And to that particular question, Nagarjuna answers with the verse 105. Nagarjuna states, with discipline and concentration, wisdom too, attain nirvana, peaceful, disciplined, immaculate, unaging, deathless, inexhaustible, and quite distinct from earth and water, fire, wind, sun, and moon.
내게 단도 디 타바트비를 안에 담보데 타바세지 요거지 수도 예제 쳐거지. 타바데다가 예제 쳐바데 예제 대한 다 그거 우주 잠만 봐. 아니 탑람들이요. 탑람들 점제 어딘데 터네 아니 타바트비 예제 직접. 내가 타바트비 탑람 가려서는 다 출임 된다. 라바섬 냠슬럼 그래서. 출임다 띵 싫었음. 또 타바트비 탑데 아니 남대에서 남대라 아니 라바섬 남 라바섬 냠래서. 다 대가서 아니 타바트비 탑람 쪽으로 남대에서 딱하다 듀 동화들 가는 거더라. 동화 저도 거봐 동화. 이냐 봐 동화 중에 요 군중 도셔도 다 탑에 동화도 군중도 된저 거봐 내가도네. 다 탑에 아니 타바스에 요래서. 요건 요가에나 내 탑에 탑트 가래. 타바트에 탑람 가르쳐 줬다고. 갈랑내 저 어쩌네. 아니 남 라바스는 냠래 저 그래서. 되셔.
So, so when we talk about liberation, the first thing is to have a strong sort of like belief that there is a liberation, that there is a sort of a way to be liberated from the suffering. And after that, we must go and search for the path of liberation. And this, in this way, we can attain the liberation. But this type of belief should not be something that is solely based on faith. It should be with a backing of logics and reasoning, something that has been laid out with a strong logical and strong logical and reasoning sort of like structure. And so, in Buddhism, especially in Buddhism, when we talk about liberation, it all comes down to the three fundamental practice: the practice of discipline, the practice of concentration, and the practice of wisdom. In the previous sessions, we have been talking about the suffering that has been experienced by all the rebirths or all the sentient beings that take rebirth in the samsara. And there we were introduced to the noble truth of suffering. And then we said that these suffering are not something that is intrinsically existing, innately there in the samsara. It is something that depends on the origin of the suffering. So there we were introduced to the noble truth of the origin of suffering. And then afterwards, we discussed that there is liberation. And then we came to the understanding of the noble truth of the noble truth of cessation, that there is cessation of all the suffering. And then here, the practice of the three fundamental practices, the practice of discipline, concentration, and wisdom, in this particular case, introduces us to the noble truth of path. And this is the path that leads us to the liberation.
나 라바섬스 냠래 남 라바섬 냠래 쳐가 다 출임세 되나 지난 주는 그다음 가서 교와. 아니 샘제가 퇴짜반 샘제 심바가 퇴짜반 나 대출임자로. 그래서 저 교와 라치 사와이네. 대출임자로. 나 출임 남아야 되게 몇개 좀 출임세네 비셔. 룡아 예숨지 니저도 내줘라. 룡숨당아 얘기 숨. 된저 마 도미야 돼 안에. 출임자보다. 출임자보다 따지는 게 최념내 제한 출임세 대배 사신 출임 사신 나지 있어. 명하게 예제도 약간 어떤 바에나 어떻게 안에 취념을 세제 카보사를 쏟아 등이 되게 나와다 시럽 나와다 이제 카보쳐서 저 수림대 안에 시작하고 명하 예성 이제 약간 어떤 바에나 대난신게 안에 소소 등이 되게 약간 차 근데 이제 안에 시럽 약간 시럽 대 등이 되게 약간 매바에나 다 시럽 되게요 랍스뭐 차고 가서는 쌤데 가서라 초대가 초대되는 안에 라바스 치마 시럽 시럽들 라바데 같이 마셔 때 딩을 맞아 양생하서 봐 시자라 가서는 시럽들 맞아 믹나시 소라다 아저나 시럽되게 딱 간도 녀몽 와서 코발 걸 저거대 아니 녀몽 독성 경황들 독성 그 나노네 아니 마르크 저거대 마르크지 마르크게 단념보대 아니 달라봤으면 나라다 냠네 가레나다 시럽마도 심박에다 마르크 녀모 세토 마르크 메와선 게 타마테다 뭐마테다 시럽되게 소스 시럽되게 마르크에 잡아도 맞잖아 아니 타바타버스 그래서 나 던졌는데 근데 냠네 세트 계속 쇼랬어 타바토베
So the three fundamental practices, the first being the practice of the discipline. So, in a very general context, understanding the practice of discipline is applying oneself to the service of the sentient being in the benefit of the sentient beings. But then we can also talk about this in sort of like more technical term. We can understand the sort of like taking the vows, especially to avoid or abandonment of the 10 non-virtuous deed, the 10 non-virtuous deed that is led through by the body, mind, and speech. The three of the body, the four of the speech, and the three of the mind. And to be able to abandon these 10 non-virtuous action and to sort of like bind oneself towards a vow uh, to abandon them and then to apply oneself to the 10 virtuous actions is also understood as discipline, because when we talk about the practice of discipline, it all comes down to the manner of conducting one's mind, body, and speech. And that it is understood that this very practice, out of the three fundamental practice, discipline becomes like the foundation, like the seed that leads to the fruition, the ultimate fruition. And so, if one doesn't have a good foundation, one doesn't have a sort of like a fertile seed, one is unable to produce that ultimate fruition. And so, therefore, by the practice of discipline, we're able to conduct our body, speech, and mind properly. And if one doesn't have a proper conduct over these three, the problem is that we're unable to establish a firm and unmoving concentration. We're unable to we're unable to participate in the meditative absorption. And if we don't have that kind of strong, firm, unmoving concentration, we'll not be able to analyze the true nature of phenomena, and by which we're unable to arise the perfect wisdom within ourselves. And the very purpose of the practice of concentration is to arise the perfect wisdom. And so, for that, we need to conduct our body, speech, and mind properly. And so, the very purpose of arising the perfect wisdom or the practice of wisdom is to counter the obscurations. So, we usually talk about the three poisons. And from these three poisons, the one that is the very cause of rebirth and samsara is the ignorance. And the sort of the antidote to the ignorance is the perfect wisdom. And with the arising of the perfect wisdom, we can counter the ignorance. And therefore, to be able to do that, we need to have uh, sort of an excellent study and learning of the fundamental practices.
되제 다데네 어딜라마 직접 니디 다 타박이 문제로래도 근데 타바데네 남냠 라바서 냠살람바데네 타바토고는 타바데 뭐부터 컨트롤 세지 어디게 안에 타바데 뭐부터 쇼도 커버스는 컨트롤 커버를 타바요나 타바데 컨트롤에서는 타바데네 동화 시브 동화면에서는 시바잖아요 커버를 제와면서는 내배는 투버서 녀몽고 팀에 먹으면 금방 쳐도 주버서 다데네 안에 딜라 타바데네 안에 게나 게스예요 말이지 히세드네요 말이지 문제선다 안에 쑥 살래 도전에 대바인 바선다 사도 주던 내가 논다는데 다만 니만으로서 potenziale raggiunge pa 대바레스 가서는 타파티 엄마한테 안에 되제도 좀 맞지나네 좀 맞지 있자고라 그래서 나 된저 안에서 좀 멜로 중간쯤에 봐 대바 뭐거든 어 디레도 타파게 뭐것도 디레지레스
So the first two line of the verse 100 and 105 talks about how to the first line, sorry, it talks about the attainment of nirvana. But now the three lines most so precisely from the understanding of peaceful, discipline, and immaculate, tells us the nature of liberation. What is that nature? How is that liberation that we are striving for? So, because it is the perishing of all the suffering, cessation of all the suffering, it is peaceful and disciplined. Because it is without any stains of the obscuration and ignorance, it is immaculate. It is unaging. It is deathless, inexhaustible. And when we say quite distinct from earth and water, fire, wind, sun, and moon, it talks about the nature of the nirvana. Because unlike earth, water, fire, wind, sun, and moon, which are all compound phenomena, nirvana is a non compound phenomena. And therefore, its nature being a non compound phenomena makes it distinct from the earth, water, fire, wind, sun, and moon.
나 타파스에 대한 딱 봐야 되래. 근데 젠더도 써 럽스 그래. 남네 제제제 타마들 딱 봐도 오지. 근데 저 저도 가서는 대 남라바서 남네 잡아 되는 뉴모 같은 막방 아니나. 연자 잼버도 비. 뉴모들 연자 잼버도 비. 뉴버 저다. 뉴버 도지. 또 텔라 타파서다. 도도잖아. 대 안에 대 근데 가 수제 가 잼버도 여기다. 직방 잡아야 뉴버도 직방 와서 나대 짜도 연자 잼버도 비. 뉴버 저 뉴버 도지. 네 안에 딱 tapato스 그대로서 그래서 네 tapato스 주바트야 다시 톱사나 땐도 다 하를 때 돼요 주바트야
So, since it's a non-compound phenomena, so it is also a permanent phenomena. Now, one may feel very sort of like strange, seeing that after practicing for so long, the thing that we are attaining at the end is something that is permanent in nature. And the very reason it is permanent because by the attainment of this particular liberation or nirvana, one possesses the potential to cease the arising of the obscuration. So there is no longer arising of obscuration within oneself. And that ability to cease the arising of the obscuration make it so that one is in a state where there is no longer arising of the obscuration. And by that, they're in the permanent state of the cessation of obscuration. And therefore, this very nirvana or the liberation is by nature uh, permanent phenomena.
되지 다들 내가 저 어디나 막딱 딩을 남 남대시에 가서 라바 숨시라 라서 맞아 다지다 남ngay 나는 제와나 남대들라 근데 통남다 탑지 타바 탑지 남대라 통남다 원남이 없다 다모데나 통남다 원남이 시에 가서 다모 내게 자다 주시도 다 통남게 연대로 통남 연대 가서다 시에 가서 어 전주일라 된세더라. 대시보다 통랑 전주일라 된세. 그래도 내가 담보데 시딩들에다 텐다 처럼 음 제다 전도다 가다 신도 장다 띵띵다 당념 되든 전주 일라데스 냥의 톱되기고 계속 계속 락스. 네 시딩들.
So, uh, in the previous verse, we discuss the three fundamental practices, and by which we were introduced to the noble truth of path. And so now in the verse 106, when we talk about the path, we tend to classify them into the five paths in which we have the path of attainment, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. In this particular case, when we talk about the path 106, Nagarjuna specifically talks about the path of seeing, and in which he talks about the seven limbs, or the seven limbs which are the elements that leads to the Buddhahood. So in this verse, Nagarjuna states mindfulness, discernment, diligence, a joyful mind, and flexibility, concentration, evenness. These seven limbs are elements that lead to Buddhahood. They gather virtue and attain the state beyond all pain.
그래서 당한 대 남례체발라 당포대 첨바야 보죠. 첨바. 이 동남 가서 다 지된 chanjo subdin 나눠 셔버다 진짜 첨바세도 다데 첨바니 있어서 보죠. 있는 데가. 아니 첨바야 보죠. 그래서 첨바데 다다 되면 봐이나. 냠래 카다 같이 봐이나 때 단다 직접 봐이나. 제도. 나 첨바지 장아이나 그 첨바나 메대 봐이나. 네 제도라. 제도에는 가르 장아이나 그 첨바데 보면 봐이나. 대 진짜네 그 치수 냠래 카다 같이 보면 대 첨바나 직장하는 남사지 난 라도 쓴다 첨바나 라도 어디선다 템바 아니 니버샤 바데 백해 좀 좀. 나 지dan 게 템바 니샤 템바 템바 야고서 데 지dan 취했단 말에. 취했단 말에 남샤 제도 가서 메데 나나야. 럽종 쳐봐야 나래. 내가 쳐봐야 카레 쳐봐야 나 템바데 저거 쇼요에나. 데 딱다 데 내가 나 따다 야고 말에. 럽종이나 야고 좀 말에. 최념내도 대회장 그 템바데 내가 나 따다 용. 그래서 템바 아니 야고 쇼고 보다. 계속 쇼죠. 많이 했었어요.
So the first out of the seven limbs, Buddha said, Nagarjuna states that in the attainment of the path, one should be very mindful. So one should be very mindful and have a great awareness in whatever they're doing. Because if one doesn't have a mindfulness, if one is not aware of the actions that they're doing, what happens is that whatever, for example, they are studying or whatever sort of wisdom that they might have heard, they will forget that afterwards. After a certain time, they tend to forget it. Whatever they have learned, they forget it because they were not learning it mindfully. So it's very eminent that one should be very mindful in any action that they're doing. And this particular advice does not is not bound simply to the practice of Dharma. Even in our day-to-day life, whatever action that we're doing, if we do it with sort of like a mindfulness, with a great mindfulness, being mindful about it, we don't forget things that we have learned. We don't forget things which we were told. And then every action becomes sort of like meaningful. So therefore, the first one is to be mindful, and then we have different type of mindfulness uh, practices that enables us to have a mindful to be mindful and to have a greater awareness of our actions.
이제 아니 니바들 저라도 남들 집에 실업세다. 다 대양 아니 대장 공도 쉬서요. 다 실업세 때 같이 마셔서 다 녀몽 배 잡아 잡아 지금. 다에 실업세 같은 맨날 좀 그래. 미그나 저래서 다 대대 양생생도 쉬러 빠지. 어 해야 되죠.
So the second one is discernment or the wisdom pertaining discernment between the virtuous and the non-virtuous. Since we have already discussed this quite a lot in the previous session, Geshe said that he believes that we have ample understanding on this one. So we'll not elaborate much on this.
근데 준비세들다. 좀 받들. 근데 준비세들 다 실업 때 전바 yap고 여가세. 근데 실업 yap고 여가이나. 다디 준비세들이야. 매바이나. 다디 그냥 준총도. 그래서 나 준비세들 그렇게 좀 좀. 저와 맞아가이나. 그러나 딜라가 간데 준비 준비 매바이나 때 가서 레몬직다 리바직 레가나야 좀더 쉬어요. 조금 더 그래서 다른 레몬되게 리바드는 당하다 빼 담벌레 인샤선 간담지 야주 안에 대대라다 니셔서 리바드를 전도 쇼는 칼리 칼도 내가 공연을서 그래서 나 전도 세대 백해 좀 줘. 먼저게 단남지 배방을 시켜주는 전도 전에 놀라 이만 백소다. 전도 여바이나 바다 채도 없어. 전도 세대 개좀 줘.
So the third one is diligence. Uh, being mindful and having the wisdom to discern
아,
without diligence will not be fruitful because one will not be able to persevere in their practice if they aren't diligent in their practice. So one particular illustration that we usually it's quite a common illustration that we do is the story of the rabbit and the tortoise. It is said that there was a race in which the rabbit and the tortoise they were having a race, and the rabbit who had run really fast and then reached a certain point, thought that the tortoise will take ages to reach there. But the tortoise, being diligent, he was moving. Despite of how fast he was moving. And then the rabbit, he just thought the tortoise is going to take ages to reach there. And then he just fell asleep. And then at the end, it is said that the tortoise crossed the finish line before the rabbit. So this particular illustration tells us that even one may be very mindful and one may have great wisdom to discern. If they are not with diligence, they will not reach the ultimate fruition. So therefore, diligence is a very important component in the practice.
네, 데레다 준비 다스네. 그래서 가와서. 다시 아니 전조이라 시바데데 가와래도. 다 최제를 가난다 떠난다고 보고다. 다 준비요 바딜라 아니 템바야 보여. 준비야 보여 봐. 아니 이제 시라바야 보여 봐나. 딜라 최 데게 최 냠내셔. 롭상셔. 근데 가난 진짜 떠나지 매봐이나. 근데 지금 말. 대체 믿으잖아요. 아니 가봤어. 가봐서 떠나치대 제일 내가 언제 다님 요새도 나데 가난도 떠나면 내가 될 제일 앞에 nhập 전 제도 말 진짜 좋은 말 진짜 가봤어야 돼 요거는 ран싱게 아니 가봐도 이제 전에 전도 치거든 에데나 이제 아니 소소 가래나다 싫었던 요바데 대저 당도라 어디서 난 가봤어야 돼 계속 좀 가난
And the fourth is a joyful mind, or to be joyful. Uh, so even if one may have diligence, one may have the wisdom, discern, the wisdom of discernment and be mindful. But if they are not joyful towards the practice of dharma, they might not apply that in that particular field. If one has a sort of like a joyful mind towards the practice of dharma, feeling joyful every moment that they are doing the practice, then one can apply all of these positive traits that they have, the advantageous traits of being mindful, to have the wisdom of discernment, to have diligence in that very particular practice. So therefore, in the practice of Dharma, another significant component or characteristic one should have is to be joyful about practicing the Dharma, to have a joyful mind.
이 쪽으로 다 데려다 신장세지 신장세나 가서 우선 레저로 몰라 레다 심 내가 가라나 쪽에나 강한 매듭지 레저로 몰라 강하기는 매듭 딱 저게 이제 시내다 대비 들어가 가서 신장세지 신장세 신도 창도 가라나 책 창다 가라 곰도 빼나 뒤로 시내도 공부는 몇 번째 질렀다 네 대대 간담전 나이가 차도 걸려는데 다 신장세 내들 답 대들라네 죽여라 아니 류이나래 강하면 쓰면나 강하면 망이 어떻게 좋다 다시 레슨 내가 가르치는 제발라 아니 데이터라 아니 በት 강아주냐 맞아 망신가 신게 어떻게 줘라 어 내려질 아니 신장세 같다 신장세 뭐 딘도 데야 여가 나타나 생기고 다시 제대로 어디를 가와 되고 하는 신장 때문에 강아주는 매도잖아 무슨 딱 제대로 딘도
So the fifth one is the flexibility. So what it means when we say flexibility is the ability for the body to flow wherever the mind targets. It means that one being capable of applying their body to a practice that the mind has targeted. So even in the practice of arising the calm abiding, so during the practice of arising a calm abiding, it is said that after a certain level or certain duration of practice, when they have established uh, a very strong calm abiding, it is said that at that particular point, they will reach a point where their mind and body are able to follow uh, this very calm abiding, and that there is a great bliss. And then the more you sit in the calm abiding, the more bliss you experience. And at that time, one has attained the flexibility. And the very sort of like the very cause of the arising of this flexibility of the mind and the body comes from the joyful mind towards the practice of dharma. With that joyful mind, arising of joyfulness, one is able to establish that flexibility.
내내 다데 이쪽들아 데려다 띵이지. 띵이지에서 계속 되는 건도 쉬면 다 데려 가잖아. 띵이들이 템포 몇 번이나 냠내치도 맞아. 가잖아. 삼로데 가사가라 쇼. 삼 냠내치고 삼면 아니나 최대 냠내치고 아니나 삼나. 다시 띵이들 템포 몇 번이나 아니 치마다. 아니 그바가 원더선. 냠내치에들라 삼로데 mel라가서 삼로 남의 숙좀 벌려나. 삼로데 가사가라 더 되다. 선나는 냠내치기 이제 관계하고 생각. 나데 띵이들이 숙주 총을 젠지 아니 남면가 원더선. 삼로데 배 삼는 삼아 걸어. The thing is, there's a naming teacher. Then I think sometimes, yeah, naming measurement, that's too much. Too much ginger and it's big, but they have several materials. This and that's a master thing. It is a short amount of them. And they kawaii na some of the lega shitting, lega in the lobster in a carina cola, shitting. But net to be a namsha juvenile. Kata culture thing is the way you went, lega in a carina, the way you must have. Some of the shitting. Someone I see, Tatamoran de Rotogra. The thing is that the thing is that they catch a much.
So then the sixth one is concentration. So concentration is a really significant, it's a very significant uh, component of the seven limbs, because one who does not have a great concentration is not able to focus on their object of target. And so when one is practicing meditation, if one doesn't have a very focused mind, one doesn't have a great concentration and a firm, unmoving concentration, what happens is that their meditation is susceptible to sleepiness and guilt. And so, because of the sleepiness and the guilt, they may either have a very blur or a vague sort of like focus, or in other case, they might have a very restless mind. And because of that very restless mind, what happens is that the mind tends to focus on many different things. It does not focus on a single point. And since it becomes unfocused, it is unable to sort of like view this object in a very clear manner. And so, therefore, to sort of like tackle this, one should have a very good concentration. And concentration is not something that is just a practice that targets meditation. Even in our day-to-day life, whatever action that we're doing, whatever thing that we are doing, if we're not able to have that focus or concentration towards that action, then that action becomes it does not become as good as it could be with concentration. So it applies both to the practice of the dharma as well as in our day-to-day life. So concentration is very significant in the practice of dharma, to especially to have a very focused mind on the object of meditation.
되지. 아니 담아들라 다 데려다 단념 전주디 나왔어. 단념서 가데 아니 차단 예능 차단 매베 단념. 뭐 되게 아니 담아들라 전주 단념서 예능 다 차단 뭐 아니 란조라 차버라 신조라 땅. 딘데게 당선 매베 차단 이게 뭐 란조라 신조라 땅와 딘데게 란조라 차바 전부 다 신조라 땅와 숙 전부에는 예 아니 냠내다 다 쳐도. 그래서 아니 단념서 그냥 계속
And the final one of the seven limb is the evenness, or another term that we use is the equanimity of the mind. So what it means is to be at a point where you are free from the biases and the exaggeration of the mind, saying that not being attached to loved ones, nor neither being attached to loved one, nor being nor refuting, or nor being sort of like disgusted by someone that is considered to be one's enemy. So to be from the mind of attachment and the mind that considers something repugnant, And to be in that state is known as to be in the state of evenness or equanimity. Because if one has that mind to either be attached to someone they love or to be repulsed by someone that they hate, then their mind will be in biases, and then there will be many different thoughts that would disrupt their concentration in practice.
근데 전조 연락에다 뭐저 돌도로 지다데 야와셔나 다 먹고 먹셔라 저요 말아서 로로도 지다데 네도세
So this is, Keshila said, this is uh, a very brief explanation on the seven limbs uh, of the elements that leads to Buddhahood. And if we elaborate on each of these, definitely we can elaborate, but then right now we are short on time, so we won't be able to do a more elaborate explanation on this.
다들 마데 자다 야다 뒤인데도 자다 뒤인다 싫었다 아니 시내들 싫었다 시에들도 싫으면 3대 윤인데 3대 매들 야네 싫으면 간라 뒤니 여봐 시바이 자서 나체 되고 차버지 싫은색들
So the verse 107 talks about the wisdom that is sort of integrated with the concentration or the calm abiding. So Nagarjuna states that lacking wisdom, concentration fails, and without concentration, wisdom too. For someone who has both, samsara's sea fills no more than the print left by a hoof.
또 되게 가서는 싫었다데 데리다 어 3대에서는 다 띵이 있어보라 싫었다 띵이 띵이 아니 son대도네 냠내 쳐버려 지금에는 지게 하고 용 말, 지금에는 지게 하고 용 말했어 그 대전이 야보증을 요구하는 아니 집에 자주 봐 아니 개도 그래서다 자주 개도 그래서 내가 집에 자주 개도 그래서 또 변화 심지들에게 제대로 된 심지 제도다 어디서 그래서 심지지 제일 가지고 된 저거 제일 때 가지고 돼서 칼칼 제일 스테이트로 나가다 가지고 있으면 라로다 심지 이래서 그래서
So the verse 107 tells us that uh, in the practice, wisdom and concentration should be in a union. One should not be without the other, because if a concentration that does not have wisdom, that concentration fails, and a wisdom that is not accompanied by concentration, that wisdom too is unfound. And the practitioner that has both of this, he can or she can easily cross the sea of samsara. And it is like the illustration states that it is like following the prints of the hoof of an animal to find them. If we see that those footprints of the hoof that they have left behind, we can easily follow the trail and then be able to find that animal. So it is that easy for someone that has both the wisdom and the concentration to liberate oneself from the samsara.
근데 다 대호들 데려잖아 지난 방자 먹고 싶으셔 다들 타바토가 제발 냠내들 제발 방자 먹고 방 거라 방자 나네다 근데 어디야 방자 방구에게 다 쳔바도 직스나 로마된지 더 줍시 있어서 대인스로 로마된데 줍시 제대나 니만 년지 아 럽송 강나 봐서 대다 남나 삼바 메지데 되는 로에 시바 지마라서 어디 데려서 시den스
So, in the path of attaining the liberation, we know that there are many objects of abandonment. And so, in the verse 108, Nagarjuna states a sort of like a section of these object of abandonment, which is known as the 14 worldly points. So, Nagarjuna states, the kinsman of the sun did well pronounce with silence on the 14 worldly points. On these you must not ponder or reflect. With them, your mind will never be at peace.
네 로마된지 따바 줍시 있어야 가르쳤잖아 아니 좀 되다 미치게 뒤바슈다 뒤바슈도 전에 아니 코란 그 썸로 나눠가다 썸도데 다다 제된 다서 어디 강사제 제된 사람 너 제되더라 전전이 아니 어 다도요 다도 주가 신샤 돈에 썸로 된대 좋군데 근데 따와트 제된다 아니 다다 제된이 아니 딱 봐래 니가 많이 봤다 왔다 얘가 싫어 다다 제된 딱 봤다 왔다 메딱 봤다 왔다 니가 힘 봤다 왔다 니가 많이 봤다 왔어 따와 싫어 되나 시책제 근데 니와들 다다 제된 타다 된 봤다 왔다 메템 봤다 왔어 니가 봤다 왔다 니가 많이 봤다 왔어 신년에 제천서 대시도 안에 집어들 안에 시총 예총서 제네 안에 대신체 봐 안에 총배자 총찬네 상계도 뭐 총찬네 안에 중계 말했어 니 제가 구조 총서 니가 많이 받다 봤어 중리 총서 지금 중리세요 안에 르다 소 찍다 와다 다들 다 왔어 중리가 좀 접시스 어떤데 또 스타디 가서 와서는 그런 게 삼로데 가더나 다다 직된도 다도 주변 인샤샤라 돈에게 추가당도 전에 아콜라 내데 한송을 내 자야만 좀 되대 그래서나야 아니 다다 되고 말아 가서는 다도 주변 말아 말에서는 뼈저 밑에 삼로데 그도 되나 콜라지 괜찮다 차로가 대신에 내 한송 내 말씀 없었나 너무 된다
So these 14 worldly points comes from a sort of a query from a person to the Buddha. It was a question that a person asked Buddha, and the particular mindset of the person that was asking these questions to the Buddha was someone that had the philosophy that tells that both self and the samsara that is in its surrounding are all permanent phenomena and are inherently existing, innately existing, existing by themselves. And with that particular mindset, he asked these questions to Buddha. The first four set of the question was either uh, the sort of like the samsara is either is it permanent, is it impermanent, is it both, or is it neither? And then the second set of the question was, is there an end to the samsara? Is there no end to the samsara? Is it both or is it neither? And then he asked, will the Buddha, after death, will the Buddha be born again or will they come back to the samsara? Will they not come back to the samsara? Will it be both or will it be neither? And so there are these 12 계실라 디 타마니 디카라 줍시나.
한마니데 데레도 르다 소니 직거래 다 데레스
And the final two are whether the mind and not mind, the soul and the body, are they single entity or are they separate entity? So with these, there are these 14 questions, and the Buddha, understanding that the one that is asking these questions have asked it with the sort of like the scope of understanding both self and self, in that case, the soul and the surrounding world to be inherently existing, innately existing, truly existing. Buddha had not answered to that person. And these 14 sort of questions are understood as the 14 worldly points.
근데 이제 아니 생각에 잘 보선 직접이네 직하도 팀 이제 저거죠
Ale Korangi tanda dipti like chuachi tu tenanglo la kare tu lana tijira sha nga tsuki tanda tenanglo la nga tsuki tsikche kyada shiti nga tsuki tikap so nga tsu gombo lutru ki sumba di nga tsuki Dirisha nga tsiki dendregi nga tso ta kewa lai chiyorwa ki kewa lai di chido nga tsiki ta dene thar kore shepe samlo di yunga di nga tsiki dendregi lo di nga tsiki khala na ta chanchu senpa chi pa sha su na nga tsiki namgyun ki nga tsiki ta le thangbo wa la so pa dendregi kewu chi yinpa ina nga tso lama shu ina tra lam shuwa ina le thangbo wa tro chi ina dendregi lo di nga tsiki le hajang nga tsiki ta kakpur was la chiro nga tsiki den den zang nga tsiki den de gi nga tsiki chanju semba phapu be nga tsiki le thambo wa chi da nga tsiki lama shu chi khwa na ke wa len tu den de gi kulung ki che semje rang gi thön du ke wa len gi la den de chi nga tsiki su yor bes la chi den de chi thok pu sha
다 데레 다
di thaba ma tho be khang sa yin ba na den de gi lo dan den be nga tsiki ke bu khan de da chi yor semje thön du ke wa len gi isla len thu ni yor bes
데 가서나 타바 마더베게 다 소소지고 딘데게 딱 간사직 선제 신이 된다 같은 데 지대 개발된 게 배대 개발된 게 있어요. 딘데게 라왕 열에 말했어요. 다 에티가 좋더라도 딘데는 다디 어 지단계 청주선바 전주선바다 타바 마더베 전주선바야 타바 마더베 가능하다 박발 남기를 제대 전주선바 박바 장생 박바 세저로다 진짜 대바이나 아니 개발하라고 열었어. 타바토메다 아보 네 전주선바들은 니어 당한데 아뭐야 택매라야 슈네 야 전주선 받게 찍다 한번이네 링에 봤어요. 한번이네 택받지는 남나슈 내야 통 소남 저람 통남 또 통남도는 파과 강사 차더라 근데 강사들도 다 받아 터비었 말이야 얘네야 컨절라 또 차샤바이나 네 대여스 가다나 가왔지나 기반을 말하고 요레스 디 많이 배당 얻었죠 믿좀 받던들라 어디에 그 뭐남 잡았단 말도게 어디에 지기 삼바게 되게 소소게 삼도 군나데 항상 야버렸어 근데 삼도 땅 tum나 삼도 충격되다 즉 삼도 땅 삼게 손남 밖에 못 사도 나 손남 싸워 두고를 되게 관계네 마음발을 개발해 본데네 어디에 네 소설 개발 호환에 나가면 되게 근데 내 랍치 못 사도 남산 매준나요 어디에 삼도 땅도 쉬어버렸어 이날 삼도 땅 안에 신경 가지고 연결해서나 달려가서 땅하다가 저거로 왜나다 담아왔던 전에 연구했어 이나다 되게 소남 되게 관계 아니면 어떻게 과학업체 된다라 그랬어.
So this is the answer to the question that Ditila has posed. Geshe said that uh, for for those who want to be reborn with such mindset, and those who are not bodhisattvas, those who are born with the mindset of being service, to be of a service to sentient beings, uh, we must understand that when we talk about the arahants, we have three different type of arahants. We have the bodhisattva arahants, the Arya arahants. When we talk about them, they are the ones who are bodhisattvas and uh, who have by themselves adopted to the mind of the bodhisattvas. But then at the same time, we have two different classes of we have other two classes of arahants. We know them as the arahats who are known as the hearers, and then the ones who are known as the solitary realizers. For them, they are not bodhisattvas. Though later they will arise that mind, but at the particular moment they are not bodhisattvas, but they have the ability because of their sort of attainment of the state of arahants, they have the ability to take birth in the samsara with that very mindset, which is known as taking birth with their own wish. They have that sort of like they have that sort of ability to take rebirth in the samsara with that sort of mindset. They can be born again in whichever way they want to be born into samsara for whichever sort of mission that they are going to come to be born in the samsara. But for us who are a beginner practitioner, or in some case being the very first step in practice, being those who are in the very first step of the practice, for us, it is impossible to be born in this way because we don't have the freedom of how to be born, where to be born, in which conditions we should be born. But to have that sort of wish, to have that sort of wishfulness to being born again in that way, does contribute in accumulation of great merits. And by the power of these merits, after many lifetimes, one will definitely reach that state where one will be able to come back to the samsara by their own wish with that particular mindset. So those who are able to come are the arahants of the here and the solitary realizers. And us, the beginner practitioners, for us, it is only in intention, but as the practice, it is not possible for us to come back with such mindset.
나 완전히 다들 전죽쌤 세대 고와잠지 그러지. 나발로 고와잠지 아니. 손은 빡도 못 살았어. 어때 맞아 고와잠 맞아. 전죽쌤 세대 어쩌고도 다 삼세 근데 삼로 깨직 직 같이 직 땅도 봐이나. 손은 빡도 못 살았어. 그래서 나 대선자 가이선다 완전히 끼와 먹고 싶어져. 근데 그 삼로 권유이 좀 말이야. 맞아요. 내가 저기 메시지를 담보나 제한도 좀 이렇게 권유 막 클릭 다 로컬 가담지 돼서 뭐뭐지가 거의 전주 쌤세도 권유여라. 근데 근데 거 못 잡아서 대통 삼로 땅 도나전 어떤 전주 쌤세도 같은데 저러 채나 삼상 근데 지 남네 치고도 삼상 삼로 같이 책 걸다 손안 빡도 못 살.
And so, even if we have heard about the term bodhicitta, the very merit that we accumulate just by hearing the term bodhicitta is unimaginable. It's unimaginable. We cannot estimate the amount of merit that we can accumulate just by hearing the term uh, bodhicitta. And then to have a certain type of devotion, to have a certain type of joyfulness, even for a single moment, if one arises a great joyfulness by hearing the term bodhicitta, one accumulates immeasurable, unimaginable amount of merits. And then to think about it, to meditate on it, to contemplate on it for even a single instance, a single second, or even a single moment uh, generates unimaginable, immeasurable merits to oneself.
이제 다단다 대죽들은 맞는데 얘라 중이라도 다 대들은 시에나 차서 말아. 정말 시에서 다 대는 티버드는 얘나 대체셔라 싶어.
Geshe said that after this, it is the 12 link dependent origination. And Geshe said that if we would discuss it today, it seems that we don't have enough time. So Geshe said that he will take questions now.
Any more questions?
Can I
Diptila?
just
느끼지.
Nikila.
thank you for your answer, Geshe. It's probably my challenged mind, but so when Nagarjuna says that there is no, not taking rebirth is the ultimate, are you saying, the bodhisattva who takes rebirth to help other beings, that, I'm just, because I'm doing the middle way teachings, I'm just still confused whether this is referring to physical rebirth or concept. So I'm assuming that because of what the paragraphs which follow, he's talking to ordinary beings, not to beings who have mastered these qualities. I don't know if it's just my understanding that is mistaken.
Let's go Geshe Korangi chua the kareshala na nga chue tanda the sikje kya the shik of sunga chue pege phaba lutu kongi nga chue ki kewa lata ta se suna kewa len del ta se suna nga chue ki ta tinga chue taba res la chi song yo res nga chue yoro dendre chila nga chue zo ko res nga chue kewa ta se chi dendre yin suna nga chue tata kewa ta se la di nga chue ki ta korangi sonda china tanda korangi tanda samlo de nang lo la kewal ta la de nga chiki namju kewal le ki ta de ke che she go res ya men thanda de kewal ta she ba de nga chiki chi kewal len ba de mai ba che nga chiki chi den de la nga chiki pha gen ra ta che nga chu pe gen ra ta che nga chiki chi pe da de che nga chu kewal ta sha go res na den de sam tang go res Didi Kurang tanda gochu mandula su nga zo kewa kora rang ta ke je shigore yamena nga zo nyanga ki gen ta che nga zo kewa ngu mayimba che nga zo kewa ta la di la nga zo ki gyumzen sammo shenpa ji yore pes nga zo.
나 제가 이것도 단다. 시장 어디 꽃에 기반 저래서 내가 쓴다 아직 괜찮아 올라도. 어쨌든 먼저 시도는 기반 코어들의 토마니시 토마들의 타이어 말서. 토마스의 카드 투자 때 내내지 로tom나 되지 질라네. 저런 저랑 기반한테 되네래도 세제 때 말서. 토마테 타이어서. 토마 타이어서는 커버를 제스다. 어떻게 내가 제일 쓰면 커버를 제게 토마테 요래서. 그래서 안에 데 내가 저거래서 커버를 제노. 지단 커버를 제네 타바토바이나 제와도 못은 로데 타바토 다좀 맞아. 전조서 맞잖아. 거기 제와도 양도 로세. 이나 커버를 제 커버를 제게 토마테. 아니 똑같이 커버를 제게 내가 저거래서. 그래도 제발 뱉어 거라면 내가 이마지 제발 뱉어 내가 산. 근데 뱉어 거라면 마음이 시원해. 저 캔데 뱉어 말했어. 코알 제와데 아니 타마데 메와서 타마데 타데 요래서 코알 제와데 메와쳐 버렸어.
So Geshe said that yes, so Geshe said this is a good question, and he said that when we talk about rebirths, when you talk about rebirth, or essentially when we talk about birth, we talk about two concepts related to birth. We talk about the beginning of the birth or the cycle of birth and the end of the cycle of the birth. The thing is that when we think about the beginning of the cycle of birth, we're unable to trace the very beginning of the cycle of birth. We cannot go and say that, oh, from this point, I started my cycle of birth. But then individually, there is a cessation of the cycle of birth, which is known as liberation. And when we think about the cessation of rebirth, sometimes we might have this thought of the idea. Most probably because when we think about cessation, it's a very sort of a nihilistic term. We might have this idea that there's no longer anything after that. There is no continuum after that. But that is not the case. The bodhisattva who has attained the perfect wisdom and who has gone beyond the path of seeing, what they do is that they still come back to samsara, to the service of sentient beings. There is no cessation in a sense that there's end to the general samsara. It is end to the individual samsara, and therefore these bodhisattvas or arahants who have attained this perfect wisdom, their cycle of rebirth due to their karma or karmic debt will cease. They will no longer take birth in the samsara because of the karmic debt. Definitely by their own wish of being born to service of sentient beings. So therefore, when Nagarjuna states here uh, to stop this rebirth, he means the cessation of individual samsara and to be born again and again by the power of one's karmic actions. That is the cessation of rebirth here, but it doesn't mean that once the Bodhisattva or the Buddha who attain enlightenment, there is no continuum in a sense that that they become something that vanishes, like when you blow out the flames of the lamp, that there is nothing there. It doesn't turn into nothingness.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's okay. Getting chance.
Nikila has question.
No. Nikila,
Hi,
to you.
Geshe. I don't have a question as such. I just wanted to say thanks for taking the time to give us a bit of the biography and background information about Nagarjuna. I think when we are learning this text, it's just really interesting to find out a bit about the author. And there were so many things I didn't know. Like I didn't know he had been prophesied by the Buddha, and I didn't know the important role he played to revive Buddhism. So thank you for that, because that puts everything in really good context.
니킬라 코란기 가송스나 코란라 저기 미세 주어 카메데 마돈 드링 nga 저기 트렌디라 nga 저기 시딩 코란 마드로응라 nga 저 백은 파벌루트기 nga 저기 남타트지 대시용도 안티기 nga 저기 슝칸다지 장스나 데이 다 좀바보치 고라 nga 저기 지 딘데기 남타트지 년수나 슝디 코랑 nga 저기 지 수수기 장도에기 로데 느바체트라 펜도 쇼충고도스 데인자 다른 땡의 동아 코라랑기 nga 저기 마시에 베네즈 망보지 된 단당아 저기 남타되는 nga 저기 수트연소 스페네 차시나 nga 저기 배경 파벌루트 코라 인바이나 랑가시베 도나로 nga 저기 좀된 얘기 nga 저 롱된 인베 nga 저기 계부지 인바데 다다 테마 탐보 코소스 때때레더 진가 저 퇴연도 nga 저 숑데라 로좀 체데 량아 저 인쇼지 파용고도스 샘슈게이도스 안데인자 된데기 남타데 소마텔라 안카딘 체라 다라 소스
lessons. Ota dere jida tambone je para ta tema de ju mara. Abone sidan program to. Ala asa jume na che. Choices. Jar pos na chwate.
I just want to know that that you said that nirvana is permanent phenomena. Okay, so in that Heart Sutra, it's mentioned that there is no like attainment and there is no non-attainment. So can we say that that nirvana is permanent because there is nothing to attain, right? So could you please clarify this thing, making?
게실라 코란기 주어 카르실나 nga 저기 단기 단다 타바셰 버팅 nga 저기 다 미세 고덴 라이팅 nga 저 타와드 라로와 파발라데 다 덴데 셰스 nga 저기 단다 시람 닝부 나로 nga 저기 단다 디 차장기 월 레도 nga 저기 토바메 마토바에 메토 셰베 nga 저기 칙들 리게도스 아 계속 토바메 마토바에 메토 인바이나 안 톱자디 딱박 한테 차그레 베스 데 코란 주어레샤
단다디
톱자지 열에 베스라 지어로 nga 데레지르 코난 추월해샤
lessons. This 단다디 먼저 탑바스에 동반이 세져라. 동반이 세대 아니디 두제대 두마치나나 저는 딱 봐요. 대선에 동반디 나무 꼼발라 때네 아니 제자지 제배 연대 때 아니 딱 봐요. 대신 미시라니 뭐나한테 망자지 속내에서 소바다 도바다 마다가 매서 내 가자를 जान수 있다. 대단 바라 요 말에 세지 봐. 가자 거잖아. 저 가자 거는 좀 템퍼처 대단 막 원래 주베 저저 있는데 아니 이제 더봐요는 맞아봐요 말에 아니 속아요 말에 저봐요 대시 메시지 대파 가자라 판잖아 소. 지금 요가 가자라 가자 거는 템퍼처 거는 라왕의 거는 된대요 말에 있어. 된대 지어요. 지금 뭐 탑바도 뭐 되게시 톱에 제수 아니 그 주바도 대봐이나 아니 탑바데 가서 왔다. 대 템퍼면 그렇지. 탑바데 톱선에 빠트 거나다. 근데 톱스 제들 아니 주바트는 나. 템퍼스 되냐잖아. 근데 만나자 커버라 막 거예요. 완전 스판잖아. 근데 저서 톱에 다져대. 톱에 다 참았잖아요. 톱에 개보스납니다. 누가 저한테 아니 주바트예요. 그래서 나 딱 봤어.
So when we talk about the permanence of the liberation or nirvana, especially when we talk about the cessation, we talk about emptiness. So emptiness is when we talk about the concept of emptiness, we consider it to be a non-compound phenomena, being a non-compound phenomena or a non-produced phenomena, it is permanent by nature. Now, in the Heart Sutra, Buddha has said that there's no attainment, there's no non-attainment, so there's no form, all of these things. But all of these things are said in the context of the object of refutation. So object of refutation over here is the true existence, inherent existence, innate existence. And in that context of true existence, intrinsic existence, innate existence, there is no attainment, there is no non-attainment, there is no form, all of these. But in our experiential understanding, we have to, through our experiential understanding, there is attainment, there is form. But are they truly existing? No, they're not truly existing. So therefore, when Buddha, in his teaching of the Heart Sutra, when he says no attachment, no attainment, no non-attainment, it is in the context of the object of refutation, that is true existence or truly existence. Also,
Yes.
We
One
can
minute.
stop questions, Geshe-la.
그러나 일단 저것도 나랑 참 샤나송.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Tenzin Lakfala, for the translation, and Geshe-la for the teachings, and all of you here for the teaching. Make the Sangha complete. Let's do the dedication prayers. Join me for the dedication prayer. Thank you. May all beings everywhere plagued by suffering of body and mind obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or even fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food, may the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound to be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you once again, everyone. Thank you, Geshe-la, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
You.